Dante Unbound update affected Helminth builds, and some of the subsumed abilities you are using are now obsolete. In this video, I will share with you what I think are the best Helminth abilities in the game right after Digital Extremes made changes to Nourish, crowd control mechanic, line of sight, eclipse, and some hidden features that weren't mentioned anywhere. This is my top 10 tier list of the best Helminth abilities you can use right now after the changes. And mind you, this list will be subjective, so if you have a different opinion, feel free to comment down below. Now, I will be starting with the group and nuke setup. For number 10, I'm listing either Cora's Ensnare, Mag's Pull, or Zephyr's Airburst. I listed grouping Helminth abilities at the bottom since we have the reliable Nautilus companion now that is immortal and can group enemies easily with the right setup. I rarely use Helminth to group enemies right now, but if you don't have access to the companion, and as well as all those mods and weapon builds needed to group enemies per kill, then you can rely on either Ensnare, Pull, or Airburst for grouping. The reason I have these three instead of picking just one grouping ability is that they have specific uses and none of them is universal. For example, Airburst can be great in grouping enemies and have the same effect from Vauban's Vortex, wherein enemies get grouped up like a ball and you can nuke them instantly. The only downside though is it has a lower range compared to the other grouping abilities. On the other hand, Mag's Pull ability has better range and has an augment that pulls pickups. In addition, I also use this for ground finisher setup to group and knock down enemies so I can proc arcanes like Trickery after doing a ground finisher. Airburst can do the same, but based on experience, Mag's Pull is better and the animation is faster. The problem though is it's only a frontal pull, unlike Airburst that can form a vortex and group enemies within range, while Ensnare is just for steel path levels wherein you need a grouping ability for gas setup, easy headshot kills, or even a good crowd control to also ensnare steel path acolytes. It has no capability of pulling enemies or grouping them like a ball with a vortex mechanic, but its capability to halt a target in place and bind them close together are great features for a group and nuke setup. Overall, grouping Helminth builds are still good, but I rarely use them at the moment as there are better options while maximizing my Warframe Helminth builds for power. At number 9, I pick Rhino's Roar because although it's always good to have decent damage buff in your weapons, I rarely use this ability right now since Warframe has a different meta and not the usual slash and bleed to kill them all. In most cases, I use this ability to increase the damage of Steinek's 4th ability, but then again, there is a better Helminth option aside from just increasing the Warframe slash and bleed damage. Roar also affects abilities, and it's great in Warframes with exalted weapons to increase their overall damage, but then again, it's not as meta as before since damage increases from this ability is not as good compared to other Helminth combos available right now. This is why I have this ability close to the bottom, as it's a decent option but not universally good at all times. In number 8, I pick Loki's Decoy over Octavia's Resonator for crowd control. Now, the best crowd control in the game is kill speed, as no one will kill you if all your enemies are dead. However, there are still setup in the game, especially glass cannons that need some crowd control setup, paired with something like shield gating to help them survive in Steel Path and beyond, especially if you are a player who likes playing solo with these Warframes. Octavia's Resonator is great since you can slap this ability then mod your Warframe with max range. For the duration that the ability is active, enemies will be prioritizing the Resonator instead of the player, allowing a great source of aggro control. But after the Dante Unbound update, I think Loki's Decoy is superior, it lasts longer compared to Resonator, and it way energy efficient compared to Octavia's ability. Now, Loki's Decoy has the same characteristics as Octavia's Resonator, and enemies will prioritize hitting your abilities and ignore you. Also, I don't know if you noticed this, but Loki's Decoy is more reliable in terms of aggro control than Resonator when it comes to dealing with enemies with Overguard. The Decoy is more likely to aggro enemies with Overguard compared to Resonator, and with the recent change to Decoy that makes it tougher to kill, I think it's safe to say that Decoy is the best crowd control ability in the Helminth system right now. It also has a reworked augment called Damage Decoy that allows you to cast Decoy to enemies that also deal reflective status damage. The damage is not that great though, as it needs a specific setup to see decent damage, but it creates more chaos in the field, so definitely Loki's Decoy is a top tier ability in the Helminth system for me right now. At number 7, I still pick Thermal Sunder as one of the best Helminth abilities in the game despite of its nerf on its Subsume version. Thermal Sunder Garuda is probably the best since it has infinite damage scaling in the past with its heat mechanic. However, Digital Extremes implemented a damage cap limit to the Subsume version of Thermal Sunder, and you can't do insane damage right now with the combo. It's still viable though in farming and leveling purposes. Thermal Sunder Garuda is still great in exterminate missions, wherein you need to kill enemies at the fastest time possible so you can finish the mission, get the loot, and restart the whole mission again. Thermal Sunder Garuda is still a good option for this, since you can get unlimited cast of the ability because of the Warframe's blood-letting skill that grants energy to the user at the expense of your life. The life loss can easily be countered with a Molt Reconstruct build, and you can spam Thermal Sunder whenever you want. Also, Thermal Sunder is still a good option for solo leveling Warframe's Fast and Sanctuary Onslaught. If you don't like doing the Steel Path, Alara, Jupiter leveling, as you hate farming the Railjack stuff needed for this leveling method, then you can either level up on Hydron or Sanctuary Onslaught with a team. You can also do the Kuva Brahma and Savage Silence nuking, or just simply subsume Thermal Sunder and replace your Warframe's first ability. Mod it with enough range and power strength, and then max rank your Warframe in the Sanctuary Onslaught for 5 minutes or less, depending on what type of enemies you encounter first. If your first conduit has green area units and the tile set is compact, then expect that you can max rank your Warframe in just 1 conduit dive. But if it's not, then the average is 2 conduits to max rank your Warframes to 30. The next on the list is Necros Terrify. This is just a personal preference, but I rank Terrify at number 6 since I have tons of fun with this ability using a creeping Terrify setup with other Warframes to both slow them down and remove all their armor. The only problem though is that you need to balance range and power strength in your build, as these affects how far the ability reach and how many targets you can affect respectively. Like the other previous Subsume abilities I have mentioned, Terrify is not a universally great Helminth ability since there is a better option when it comes to armor stripping. The pros in using this ability though are that it's a mixture of crowd control, armor stripping, and it's really satisfying to see enemies run away, but they can't because they are slowed by the creeping Terrify setup. Plus, it pairs well with grouping setups such as Volt's Capacitance Nuke. Overall, creeping Terrify is a good Helminth ability, but it's just a preference putting it at number 6. For my top 5 subsumed ability, I picked Kullervo's Wrathful Advance. Although the ability received alteration, you would need a lot of power strength to get the 300% critical chance that guarantees red crit to even melee weapons that have no critical chance at all. Still, this is the best ability when it comes to red crit melee builds. If you are addicted to red crit melee weapons in Warframe, then Wrathful Advance is a great and powerful subsume ability to help you satisfy that craving and help in your progression at the same time. The good thing about Wrathful Advance is that it's a flat critical chance bonus, so even if your melee weapon has more status, you can still provide orange to red crit numbers given that you have high enough power strength in your build. The downside though is that its duration is too low that you would need to give your build primed continuity, or even the narrow-minded mod to keep the buff active in longer periods. Nonetheless, red crit melee builds are really addictive, and this can easily be achieved right now with the help of Kullervo's Wrathful Advance skill as your subsume ability. Moving on, I have Pillage sitting at top 4 of my best Helminth abilities. This is really a no-brainer, as the ability provides armor and shield stripping to the point that enemies' health are exposed to your damage. It also has a decent range that ables to affect multiple targets at once, and also it provides shield per enemy hit. With shield having a 50% damage reduction against all damage types except for Toxin, it's safe to say that you will also be making your Warframe tanky when you subsume Pillage in your build. Now pair this with Adaptation, and you will turn any squishy Warframe in a tank. Well, unless you are using Warframes such as Inaros and Nidus that don't have shield values, of course, there's really nothing more to say about Pillage, as it serves its purpose of defense strip and survivability, and this is why it's one of the best subsume abilities in the game. Now for my third ability, this is just another personal preference, but I have a setup that it's universal available to all, and this is why I rank Sada's Whisper as my top 3 subsumed ability. In some instances, you will get better damage boost in your setup with Sada's Whisper compared to Roar or Eclipse. The ability provides void damage and another damage instance and has a mini mag bubble effect that attracts bullets, and you can use this for easy headshots. But the best synergy, why I rank this higher compared to others, is its synergy with the Incarnate weapon called Elatum. Sada's Whisper has a unique interaction with the Incarnate evolution's Devouring Attrition and Devastating Attrition that grants a 50% chance for 2000% damage on a non-critical hit. If your Sada's Whisper is a 50% buff, the way it works is it creates a second damage instant for 50% of the total damage of its progenitor hit. If attrition activates on that hit, it will inherit the 2000% bonus damage. This hit then also has its chance to proc attrition, as Sada's Whisper hits are always non-crits. This double dipping ends up as a 441 times damage buff on the Sada's Whisper damage instant. Even if the progenitor hit didn't proc attrition, the Sada's Whisper hit still maintains its own chance to proc. This provides a better overall damage buff than Roar or Eclipse, especially if your power strength is on the lower end. The best part is you can subsume Sada's Whisper to all Warframes, and you can use Elatum if you have farmed it already. For my top 2 ability, I have ranked Eclipse, as it's a universally good ability right now. Not in terms of damage buff though, as Digital Extremes have dismembered its damage buff. Eclipse is highly suggested right now because of its Lunar Eclipse buff that grants 75% reduction to both shield and armor, making your Warframe extremely tanky. Say for example, if you are using mag, then you can make good use of the shield tanking mechanic wherein you put more shield values, shield regeneration, and then damage reduction coming from Eclipse and Adaptation. Aside from shield tanking, damage reduction will also be provided in your health so you have time to get out of a sticky situation. It's really a great ability right now when it comes to survivability, as with one button press, you gain 75% damage reduction that's stacked with armor, mods, shields, and also other damage reduction abilities. And finally, I still have Nourish as my top Helminth ability in 2024. Despite the recent nerf, Nourish as a subsume ability is still great because it provides guaranteed viral procs and decent energy regeneration increase. The nerf was intended to lower the efficiency of the energy multiplier, but honestly, I did not feel the nerf at all. The energy multiplier still works great when paired with Zenuric's Wellspring, providing decent energy regeneration, and it also works perfectly when paired with Arcane Energize. It also works wonder in tank setup that has Rage or Hunter Adrenaline mod, and the best part is the guaranteed viral procs do allow you to deal insane damage with Galvanized setup right now. Slash and bleed meta is over, and multiple status with Galvanized Galvanized setup is meta right now. With guns being fun and often used by players, Galvanized setup is the best when it comes to increasing the damage, and having multiple elements in your loadout will increase your overall damage. You can mod at least 3 elements in your build right now, namely Radiation, Heat, and Corrosive. Then you can add the Nourish ability for the Viral element and make it a 4-element combo. This does not only increase the damage you deal with a Galvanized setup, but it does provide better damage output also, since the Viral stacks will allow you to deal more damage to health. Given that we also have Emerald Archon Shards that increase the Corrosive stack right now for full armor stripping, the damage you get from Viral becomes insane. And that doesn't even include the heat damage stack you inflict. Nourish is still amazing, and I think it's still the top 1 meta Helminth ability in the game right now. So that's all about it. Now, I would also like to know, what are the best Helminth abilities you have right now? You can share your Helminth tier list below, and let's discuss why you chose those Helminth abilities. Squad Leader, signing off.
Stay.